Cool. I believe we're set.
Okay.
All right. Sounds good. Cool, cool, cool. So a few days ago, we were talking about Übermensch, right? It's from
hmm
Friedrich Nietzsche. Um, he talks about it while trying to explain why it is important for a man to overcome his weaknesses, especially during the times of identity crisis, when shit hits the fan, basically. If you look at it from the perspective of society, family, economics, politics, all of that. But yes, what are your thoughts about it before we get into specific details on what it has to entail?
Right. So I had a birthday a few days ago, December 16th, and I woke up that morning and there was this thought that bubbled up that something is being born today. And it
Mm,
was already my birthday. It wasn't me being born, but it was the germination of an idea. And shortly after that, um, Friedrich Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch, also uh, came into my mind. Um, I've done cursory research around the idea, but Nietzsche's work for me has always been uh, inaccessible, so very dense, and I like to think that certain pieces of information uh, there are catalytic. And
yeah.
what I mean by that is that the information only becomes available and accessible to you when your consciousness is able to,
Hmm.
actually, be aware of it. Otherwise, you're blind to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I've been corresponding with a very good friend of mine named Michael Purdy for about 6 months. And Michael Purdy is a Nietzschean scholar. He's
Mm,
he's a professor emeritus at I can't think of the university now.
yeah.
But I've known him now for 20 plus years. Um, he is also a scholar of the work of Gene Gebser. Uh, Gebser is a cultural philosopher who first came up with this idea of integral consciousness. And we'll
Hmm.
get into that later. But what's important here is that Purdy and some of the contemporaries in the consciousness studies field
Hmm.
named Nietzsche as the progenitor of integral consciousness. And basically what that looks like is the Übermensch. And so I've been studying integral consciousness for 20 years, and just over the last year have been um, moving into a more of a non-conceptual understanding
Hmm.
of this philosophical framework.
Hmm.
And again, Nietzsche has been coming up time and time again in little aphorisms and quotes. And so for me to, kind of like, become aware of the Ubermensch
Yeah.
on such an important day for me, has profound implications. And so I started
So
looking into it. Yeah.
do you feel that when it comes to the modern day spirituality, there may be a lot of bypassing, but when you look at Nietzsche's work, it kind of grounds you a little bit and makes you look at spirituality more in a realistic lens rather than an abstract thought? What do you think
Mm.
about that?
Um, what do I think about that? Because it's funny you mentioned spiritual bypassing, because normally when I think of spiritual bypassing, I think of New Age philosophies and people like Ken Wilber had what's it called, the
Oh,
uh,
let's
trans
see. Yeah, it's the pre-trance
the
fallacy. That's what
pre-trans
it's.
fallacy. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Um, okay, so So yes, and the works of Ken Wilber, Wilber came up with this idea called the pre-trans fallacy, and basically what that is the conflating of pre-rational religion and trans-rational mystical states and putting them all together. So and so you get New Age philosophies like manifestation, where it's like if you want you can manifest anything you want. You would rather manifest a Porsche rather
Yeah.
than to end the suffering of all beings. So that's
Hmm.
and it also takes takes personal responsibility out of the way too, because if you can just look at everything as one consciousness, then everything is allowed, and therefore you don't have to take personal responsibility, which is um this idea of spiritual bypassing. But more on a Christian level, though, if you look at spiritual bypassing, from that lens, you kind of get close to where Nietzsche was kind of heading with this idea of the Übermensch, because for Christianity, what spiritual bypassing looks like is um, a longing for the transcendental, and a leaving behind of the immanent. So what I mean
Yeah.
by that is that you have this this prison life on the earth where you're here to suffer, and if you're quote good enough, then then all of your riches will be waiting for you in the next life. And Nietzsche never liked that idea uh, at
Mm.
all, and so what he was always trying to espouse was um, a way for us to like enjoy life right here and right now with all of its joys and all of its sufferings.
Uh-huh.
And that for him, that was the crux of the Übermensch. It was a freedom to be. So this is a good time to get into Nietzsche's triad, right? So
Hmm.
you Nietzsche's philosophy hinges on this idea called the eternal recurrence.
Hmm.
Um, and basically this idea is imagine a demon whispering in your ear, and this demon tells you that you have to uh, live your life infinitely, every single moment of your life, all of the joys,
Hmm.
all of the terrors, every earache, every stomach ache,
Hmm.
every tragedy, every loss has to be lived over and over for infinity. you know
Hmm.
if I asked you that question, what would your response be? And
Mm.
so for
That
Nietzsche,
seems like a lot of suffering to be accepted, huh?
it depends, and that's where Nietzsche comes. Like his philosophy is, you know, um, very deep, because he says that so the eternal recurrence, that's the basic idea. All right. So
Yeah.
second is this idea of amor fati,
Uh-huh.
and that is the love of fate, right?
Okay.
And so you look at the eternal recurrence and amor fati as two poles of one whole.
Hmm.
So on the one hand, you have the eternal recurrence, where how would you how would you live life if you had to repeat it infinitely? Amor
Hmm.
fati is, can you love life? Can you love all of the joys of life, but also love all of the suffering as well?
Yeah.
Uh, because the suffering is, all events for Nietzsche are interdependently related. So
Hmm.
in his view, you can't have the joys without first building from the sufferings. And
Okay.
so the only way to be liberated is to really be able to accept it all in its fullness, in its
Hmm.
horror and its beauty and everything else. And that is a
Hmm.
very integral idea, right? It's being able to accept what's in front of you,
Hmm.
and not only accept it but love it, because it's you're not a victim of circumstance. This is something
Sure.
that you on a deeper level brought into your own existence for your own growth.
Yeah.
um my idol Jean Gebser, who the guy who founded integral philosophy in 1932, uh, he has this. Shit, where was I going with that?
Well, before you get into that though, Seth,
Before I get into that, yeah.
any thoughts on the definition of Übermensch? So it basically means overman and not Superman, right? I mean, you can say Superman, but it's not like you are invincible. You kind of
Hmm.
overcome something. Now, there might be some controversial take on this where you have a lot of men from the red pill community who are alpha masculine and they're like, yes, it's not power over me, it's power over others and how I can control and how I can dominate. So to clarify this, power over something, is it actually over someone else? Is that what Nietzsche is talking about, or is it more like power over oneself? Like in the sense power, like for example, I want to be an overmage. I am having power over myself or my desires or my downfalls or whatever.
Right. I think that's a good segue to Nietzsche, the third leg of Nietzsche's triad, which is will to power. So for Nietzsche, the Übermensch, which can be translated to Overman or Superman or even Beyond Man, and I actually like the Beyond Man title and the Overman as well because it alludes to being able to exceed beyond your own limitations, the limitations that were set for you by you know by your culture, by your family, by society itself. These
Hmm.
are all limitations, and so Nietzsche is, Nietzsche is asking us to envision a world where we've gone beyond those limitations, and you know, a world where we can live
Hmm.
infinitely, and have respect for that, right?
Yeah.
And find joy in it. Nietzsche was one of
Hmm.
the most joyous philosophers that I've ever come in contact with. His 1882 book was called The Gay Science, and it was about how to experience life with joy,
Oh,
with creative joy,
I
and
thought I
um,
thought
and
gay
so
science meant something else, but okay.
no, no.
All right.
What do they say in Yeah, so it's one of those things that
Yeah.
to be able to, and that's where the will to power comes in. So let's talk
Hmm.
about the will to power, because you were mentioning that, um, and how Nietzsche's work has been hijacked by certain movements, identity politics and things like that. But
Hmm.
Nietzsche's idea of will to power is power over oneself. It's
Okay.
can you master your own, your own habits, your own addictions, your own limitations.
Yeah.
Can you rise above those, even if they are ingrained from society, or your culture or your religion, etc. And
Okay.
so Nietzsche said, yes, it is absolutely possible to do that, to rise
Hmm.
above that, and that's where the Übermensch idea comes in. And you also mentioned, groups like Andrew Tate and the Manosphere, and how they've taken Nietzsche's work and just kind of like inverted or twisted it to, for their own
Well,
selfish gain.
Tate hasn't done that, but what I'm saying is maybe a lot of people who might get exposed to Nietzsche might mistake him and say, oh, yeah, he's a nihilistic person and he doesn't
Right.
believe in hope and all that kind of stuff. And they kind of
Yeah.
twist it. And if they see the word Übermensch or Superman, they're like, oh, yeah, control over others or having some form of dominance externally.
Yeah.
Whereas Nietzsche is talking about internal work,
Hmm.
right?
Right. Yes. So the Ubermensch was, it got mistranslated as superior man, and back in the 19th century, it was all about strength, and it was all about force and power, and how you could, gain power over others. Um, and yeah, Tate might not have used it, but I know that, Hitler did, because he wanted a biologically superior race, but he was
Mm.
completely missing Nietzsche's point, which is, that like you were saying, it's about an internal, superiority, and not superiority over others, but superiority over yourself, over your
Yeah.
own limitations and weaknesses, and how and if an entire society rose up, to that level together, what that could look like.
hmm
Mm. So
Now,
yeah,
what about when he said God is dead? Is he talking about the like who is dead? Is it like the concept of
right.
God or God in itself is dead? Like what is God
Mhm.
according to him?
Okay, so I'm going to go off on a rant. So you have uh, Nietzsche in his 1882 book, The Gay Science. He mentions that God is dead, and the paraphrase quote is, "God is dead and we killed him." All right,
Uh-huh.
so it's a very deep idea, but uh, to Nietzsche's credit, he was witnessing that at the time, right? He was coming up in like an industrial, yeah. I'm gonna skip that. I'm gonna go back. So,
hmm
um,
But I think though with God is dead, it's more so that he's not saying reject the Christian faith or reject any religion that you follow. I think maybe he's talking more in terms of don't have the expectation of afterlife or the fantasy that something
mhm,
else is going to come save you. You might have to work towards that greater higher self, and that could be the divine or God,
right,
but not to
mhm,
have the clingy hopes to have something or someone help you
yeah,
bypass or transcend something without your own self-effort, right? Is that what he
right,
meant by when he said God is dead? Like if you talk about it in terms of just blind belief, he said no, remove your blind belief, unshackle your limited beliefs, and try
yeah,
to overcome yourself.
right, yeah. That's a really good idea, but not quite what Nietzsche was getting at.
Okay.
So traditionally, religious systems were the main power, the main power, right? The Catholic Church, medieval religions. When you had a question about anything regarding faith, or even morals or ethics or anything else, you would consult the church. You would not try to come up with a solution on your own. That was not
hmm
allowed in those times. And even deeper still, you had the majority of the masses were illiterate, and so the only way that they could actually get access to God was through the priests and through the church. And so you had these, people that were dependent, completely and utterly dependent on the church to answer
hmm
all of their moral, quandaries. And
Yeah.
so, then fast forward to the Enlightenment, right, and the birth
hmm
of science.
hmm
When the Enlightenment came around, you saw this rash of atheism, and this and this moving away from religion,
hmm
into more of like a scientific age of reason. And so that is the definition for the Enlightenment. It's the age of reason.
Yeah.
And out of this, philosophical systems, all of this, the technology of the Enlightenment, came
Yeah.
about. And so people started thinking for themselves, and they
hmm
started, and so you no longer needed this moral metaphysical framework to answer your questions. You could you began to, philosophical systems began to, like, think about deeper issues and solve these problems without the need to go to these religious systems, and without the need to consult a god to do it. And so the move away from traditional religious systems is
Yeah.
what Nietzsche meant by God is dead, because
Okay.
without a religious moral framework,
Right.
a huge void was
hmm
was kind of like came in its place. And so then you have all of these people that were dependent on religion, and it no longer served
hmm
their um,
Sure.
it no
Sure.
longer served them. So
Right.
that's why people started falling into nihilism. which,
Mm-hmm.
because again, think about it, their religious systems and this belief in God, this fervent belief, was how they found all of their meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of this meaning was inherited from the culture, from the religion, from your family. It was just
Yeah.
passed down and passed down.
Right.
And
Right.
so
Right. Right.
without that framework in place, people didn't
Mm-hmm.
know how to ascribe meaning to their lives
True.
anymore. And you
True.
start and so you see this downward spiral into nihilism, which is that life is meaningless, and
Right.
there's no purpose because they
And
they had no God to give them purpose anymore.
uh-huh. And that's what Nietzsche. So he was not saying go towards nihilism, but he was also not saying stick with religion. I think it was that middle path, right?
Right. So in Nietzsche's book, Thus Spake Zarathustra,
Mm-hmm.
he brings out this idea of the last man, right? And the last man for Nietzsche is the result of nihilism taking control of our world.
Okay.
It's
Mm-hmm.
this idea that we've lost all hope and we have no purpose, and so our
Yeah.
motivation and everything that makes life beautiful and joyous has been
Mm-hmm.
stripped away,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just a gigantic void there,
Yeah.
and that's and so what you see is a fragmentation, right? There's this
Yeah.
religious framework. It gets
Mm-hmm.
fragmented. Science takes over, and you no
Mm-hmm.
longer have the moral framework in place,
Mm-hmm.
and then life starts to lose meaning, and then you
Mm-hmm.
just sink down and further down into the degradation of society itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so Nietzsche saw that happening, and again he coined the idea of the last man because if not if you don't overcome the last
Sure.
man, then the
Right.
world ends. We are doomed.
Seems like the world is in that position right now in a way, right?
The
Especially
world is.
with people my age, or maybe even anyone in this age, actually, but
Mhm.
especially the ones who are in their mid-teens and their mid-teens through mid-40s. I feel like a lot of us are having that sort of a crisis. Maybe we are
Yeah.
becoming the last man without even knowing. And we are consuming a lot of shit on social media when it comes to doom scrolling and stuff that is
Yes.
ruining our attention spans, our critical thinking side of things,
Hmm.
and even the patience to just sit and consume intentionally, or to have a positive outlook on life because we are so bombarded with so many ideas and there is no
Right.
break. And looking at the economy, it's not like it's going to be okay. We are stressed that AI is going to take over. We're stressed that the president might do something and something else might happen. So,
Right.
do you feel that a lot of us are becoming the last man without knowing?
Yeah, I think the technology that we've become addicted to, the attention economy,
Yeah,
the social media, it causes that fragmentation. When we wall off behind these screens and behind our phones. And I
sure.
go out every single day and I walk into a place and everybody is head down on their phones. They're not even, it's like
It's like
people
a
aren't
zombie apocalypse.
engaging in, right. It's like I saw this girl text a girl that was standing right next to her. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like it's just that it's that wall that our devices put in front of us,
sure.
and we all know what that does when in terms of people arguing on social media.
Yeah.
Somebody can say the most vile and hateful and horrible things because they're
Mm,
because they're behind this screen, and they're not face to face. These are things that you would never say to someone face to face, right? They
right.
say the most vile and ugly things, and I think that's because there's this degree of separation between
Mm,
ourselves and that's what the device does. That's what the technology does. It puts this screen in place that
yeah.
objectifies the world, and you're only getting, you're not getting. Let's be people. Their social media presence is not who they
Hmm.
are. That's the
Sure.
highlight reel of their life. And so there's,
Yeah.
you all
Yeah.
of these people, young people especially, that look up to influencers and all these people online because they think they have these lifestyles when
Hmm.
they're only seeing this curated, very
Hmm.
polished,
Hmm.
very fake
Right.
persona. You know, Carl
Right.
Jung used the word persona. This mask
Yeah.
that we're in public, and that's our social media presence, and that's
Hmm.
all we are anymore is our social media presence.
Hmm.
But
Now,
yeah, that's the Nietzsche's idea of the last man.
now, any thoughts on the metamorphosis, the camel, the lion, and the child? Any thoughts on that? Because I've always seen it as, oh, like, well, for the first time when I heard about it, I was like, yo, what does that mean? Camel, lion, and child? I don't see it
Right.
interconnecting. But
Yeah,
later,
that
when I read a little more about it, I was like, it made sense. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
yeah. So Nietzsche talked about the Übermensch coming in three stages, and the camel, the lion, and the child. And these three stages are very familiar with me, but in a different language. Um,
Sure.
I know I've mentioned earlier that my guy Gene Gebser, created this entire philosophical system that was literally built to transcend itself. It's called an integral philosophy, and in that,
Yeah.
Gebser prophesied that mankind was becoming aware of a more intensified consciousness. That he called integral consciousness because it has the ability to integrate all of the separate parts
Mm-hmm.
together into this whole perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the gist of it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Gebser, coined the idea for integral consciousness in 1932, in this intuitive flash of insight that he had um, that humanity was, he was witnessing the decline of the West, in the early 20th century, and he said something's got to give because, like we were just saying earlier, things are getting so bad that either we rise up, right, we
Mm-hmm.
overcome, or we're going to succumb to it, and we're not going to make it as a species. So Gebser said, well, there's this new consciousness, this new awareness on the horizon that can effectively overcome that. He calls it integral. So then he had this idea that if consciousness was you know evolving is a very loaded word, but I'll say evolving, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then it must have done that in the past. And so over the next 40 years of his life, he started working on uncovering the cultural underpinnings of four stages of structures of consciousness that he called the
Yeah.
archaic, the magic, the mythic, the mental,
Uh-huh.
and of course the newly emerging integral structure that he saw coming through creative artists and philosophers and scientists of his day. Um, you
Mm.
know, this is a cat that was hanging out with Carl Jung, and he was hanging out with Pablo Picasso and Rainier
Oh,
Marie
wow.
Rilke, and just
That's
all of
dope.
the of his time. I want that in my life, dude. I want to get
Sure.
all of the
Yeah, I wish
current
too, man.
philosophical heavyweights together and then
Right.
just powwow.
Right.
Get really comfortable, having conversations.
But
Anyway,
so,
so
but you were mentioning all these things, and they're phenomenal things to go deeper into. But how is it
I
connected
had a
to?
point. I had a point.
Mhm.
So here's the point.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So when we talk about mythic consciousness, all right,
Yeah.
for Gebser, mythic consciousness is past oriented. It's about um, uh, creating these origin stories of our existence, right? And
Hmm.
that's what religion is. Religion is all of the origin stories of humanity and how we came
Yeah.
about as a species. And we get our laws and our morals from these religious systems. And so Nietzsche was looking at the fall of religion and this mythic consciousness, right?
Hmm.
This very deep, traditional oriented consciousness structure that he saw was coming into its deficiency because it was dying. It was religion was being replaced, right? It
Hmm.
was being replaced by science and by scientific philosophical thinking. And so when you were looking at this mythic structure, right, of
Hmm.
this religious binding to the past. We're
Mm-hmm.
seeing it being replaced with this mental structure. With the Greeks, with Plato and Aristotle, that's where you kind of start to see the seeds of this critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, then the Enlightenment was when it really took hold. And so
Okay.
that was the 1600s, but it also, rolled into the Industrial Revolution, and that was in Nietzsche's day. So he was seeing how religion was being, you know, replaced by this more free thinking
Mm-hmm.
ideology, this scientific. And so when we talk about the metamorphoses, and I know that was a long way to get back to it, but
Mm-hmm.
the metamorphoses, when he talks about the
Yeah.
camel is this mythic, is this burden. They're burdened with tradition. They
Okay.
the people that represent the camel, have all of this tradition, this inherited meaning that they've had for centuries, right? This It goes all the way back, and you can trace genealogy, you can trace all of your history through some of these religious systems.
Mm-hmm.
And so he saw that the people that were the camel, and that's where he says that is the thou shalt, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
a hearkening to this religious
Mm-hmm.
moral code that was created by religion, right?
Yeah.
And so then there's a move into the lion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the lion, instead of saying thou shalt, it says I will. And so
Oh.
the lion,
Mm-hmm.
where if you look at mythic as this collective we, right, this narrative of our culture, and you can think about myth. Oh, this is good. So you can think about myth as patriotism, as
Mm-hmm.
nationalism. It is
Uh-huh.
a group. Is a group identity, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so when you have a culture, American versus European versus, you have these tribes of people. They create
Mm-hmm.
cultural narratives, and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
those narratives are so strong, right? I know that there's this huge problem in the United States with nationalism and patriotism and all of these
Right.
isms, that are a collective we. It's a we structure of
Mm.
consciousness, right? The mythic is a group. It's definitely a we. And if you're moving away from that traditional, you know, we space and
Right.
into this mental structure. The mental structure is
Mm-hmm.
a move from the collective we into the subjective egoic I, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is a move from we to I. And
Okay.
so what happens is you start to see that center move from the we into the individual.
Yeah.
Now, for extra credit, Gene Gebster says that the mental rational structure that we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
was when human beings discovered space for the first time. All
Mm.
right, now literal space before the mental structure, which Gebster deems as three-dimensional. You have the mythic structure, which is two-dimensional and
Mm-hmm.
flat, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
there's it's just a circle, right? It's a two-dimensional circle on a plane, and there is no space. It's just it's flatland.
Right.
The move into the mental rational structure is a three-dimensional. It's a move
Mm-hmm.
from a two-dimensional flat space to a three-dimensional
Mm-hmm.
universe, and that with that universe, you have the discovery of space. When you can discover space for the first time, there becomes a subjective I that inserts itself into the body, usually right between the eyes, and it is
Mm-hmm.
the center of ourselves. And so
Mm-hmm.
our subjective self views a world, an objective world out there that is spatialized, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is everything out there is space, everything in here is subject, it's personal, and so there's this walling off from the
Yeah.
group ego of the mythic to this walling off of the I, this
Mm-hmm.
conceptual I, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's number one, that's where critical thinking comes in. That's where Nietzsche's lion comes back in, because the mythic thou shalt, which is traditional,
Mm-hmm.
religious, that's where you get your morals from, to this I will, right? So
Mm.
this will to power of this I, this egoic I, is the lion. It is no longer It's the conceptual ego.
Sure.
And so that is where you have this move from the camel to the lion. Now there's a third metamorphosis, and that is the child, right?
Yeah.
And that is kind of what excites me right now, is because I am starting to perceive that the
Mm.
child in the world. And so for Nietzsche, the child is this, the essence of the Übermensch itself. The
Okay.
child represents innocence. It
Mm.
represents freedom. It represents
Mm.
creativity.
Mm.
It represents joy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because what in Nietzsche's world, living is very traumatic, and it's disheartening, and it's hard, and so you have this world, and again he saw it slipping into nihilism. But then you have, and again, let's keep in mind that the last man is the lion, right? We're talking about, a fragmented and separated egoic universe that is so lonely and so alone, right?
Yeah.
Because we've walled ourselves off into these
Mm-hmm.
single little, singular packages.
Sure.
And so here we are.
Sure.
We have no
So,
moral framework, but
uh-huh.
we also cannot make morals for ourselves. We're kind of stuck in that in intermediate space.
So you think most of us are stuck in that lion phase right now rather than embracing the
Right,
child aspect? Okay.
right.
Maybe
So,
that's where we are embracing our child aspect right now by creating this, right? Would that be true?
right. It would be true. It's it's in the act of creation. It's in the, and that's, for Nietzsche, that's one of the, you know most freeing things you can do is create.
Mm.
It is um and again, it's the essence of the child. When you're a newborn, when you're a child, you are creating your world, you're knitting it together. Every single time you look at something, you're creating an idea of this world. And
Mhm.
so for Nietzsche, he wanted to say, as adults, we could create again, and become innocent. We
Mhm.
can see the world not through the lens of what we've been given, our inherited meaning, but we
Okay.
could create a world for ourselves.
Mm.
That's this. If you're overcoming, if yourself, right, which is the whole, the method.
Mhm.
Nietzsche, for the Übermensch, is overcoming your own limitations. Your limitations are your own, you know, uh, your negative thoughts, what you tell yourself that you're not capable of doing. I'm terrified to be doing this right now,
Mhm.
which is why I must do it, no matter
Sure.
no matter how shitty the quality, no matter how much this is.
Mhm.
This is overcoming the limitations that we
Right.
set for ourselves.
For sure.
Um,
For sure.
and so that's what the child represents. There's this innocence. There's
Mm.
this, I don't know what I can accomplish, because
Hmm.
the world has told me no over and over
Yeah.
again. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Fucking awesome.
And
Yeah,
right.
definitely.
And so the child is creative. It's full of joy. It's full of hope,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
it's original. It's original. It's not what the world has given it. It is what it makes for itself. And
Hmm.
along with that is this new sense of creating good for the world. What is good and bad is no longer, a given from our inherited meanings or from our culture.
Right.
The end, we are able to decide now what is right
Hmm.
and what is wrong for
For
us,
sure.
because
Mm.
that is our new moral comportment. That is
Yeah.
our freedom. We are free to decide. Um,
Hmm.
and I think that is, for Nietzsche, that is the crux of the Übermensch, is this, and again, what to bring Gebser back into this, the mythic and the mental aren't something to be overcome and done away with. There's Each of these structures are ever present. They are important. They are part of who we are and part of how we understand the world. And so moving beyond these structures is a misnomer, because you want to take the absolute best parts. Family's a good thing. right? Tradition can be a good thing. It's just
Good.
when it becomes overbearing and overdetermined, then it becomes something that's deficient and negative.
Right.
But there's also this very positive component. Gebser calls these the efficient and the deficient aspects of each structure. So if you
Mm-hmm.
have a mythic structure that is, that is um, effective, you have this internal world, this group, this access to tradition, to family values, to there are good things about these structures.
Mm.
Um, and the problem with the basic problem with now with the mental structure is that it's that what we're experiencing is this deficient mode because we've become so fragmented, we've become so separated that
Mm-hmm.
that we've lost access to
Yeah.
the group. We've lost
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
healthy aspects.
Right.
And so the goal is to take all of the efficient aspects of each of these structures, to integrate them together, and what that looks
Mm-hmm.
like is the once
Right.
all of the healthy aspects of these structures are online, that
Mm-hmm.
is the Übermensch itself. So um, that's why all of this fits kind of very neatly with Gebster's work and Nietzsche's work. And I think I mentioned
Good.
earlier in the podcast too that you know that that Nietzsche was the is as a representative of the first integral man. That is
Yeah.
what if you study Nietzsche and then you take him seriously,
Mm-hmm.
what you find is that um, the best qualities of being human
Mm-hmm.
are present in that.
Mm-hmm.
It's radical acceptance through amor fati, right? You want to see everything outside of you right now as completely and utterly for your benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to fall in love with the whole of creation and live from that space. That is amor fati at its finest. All of the
Yeah.
joys and all of the sufferings right here, right now, and you're in love with it all, right? You're
Right. Right.
creating. I think in my own personal practice, and this is where the rubber meets the road for me, Jay.
Mm.
I You see my button?
Uh-huh.
It says make the world kind.
Right.
I have a practice of mirroring the world that I want to see. All right. And it goes like this. I walk in, 50% of my day is performing actions for others. All right. I call that appropriate karmic action. I open doors, I put carts away, I do everything I can while I'm out in my day to be kind to people, to be
Yeah.
overly kind.
Yeah.
I want to experience that world. All right. And so that is the creativity the creativity and the implementation of morals that Nietzsche's talking about. It's being
Good.
able to say, um, I don't wish for a world to
Mm.
be this way. I am going to do the actions, the appropriate actions every
Right.
single day to make the world the way that I want to see it. Right. There are people out there that do not want,
Mm-hmm.
an equitable world. They want all the power. They want all of the resources, and funneled into a small section of human beings, while the rest of the planet suffers, you know, um,
Mm.
and does without. That is not an equitable world,
So now
or one that I want to see.
when it comes to the last man, is he incapable or is he evil? Or it doesn't matter?
I wouldn't say evil, because that's a value judgment. Everything. The last man is necessary. I don't like to think of anything as quote wrong or you know imperfect. I'm very Buddhist in that regard. That I think that everything is perfectly thus,
Mm-hmm.
and that like the world as we the world as we know it is a beneficial obstacle, that
Mm-hmm.
something to be understood more thoroughly.
Yeah.
And I think that human beings have a very um, limited understanding of the way the world works. We don't know how the world works, and
Right.
we try to make these assumptions, and what that ends up doing is limiting human beings, and but more than that, it's more of a limiting to the point where people feel helpless. People feel that that there's nothing better than this. That this is all they have. They lose meaning. They become the worst that
Mm.
humanity has seen, and that's
Yeah.
why that's why Nietzsche calls it the last man, because it's
Yeah.
um, uh, yeah, it's really, it's like a hopeless place to be in, and again, that's why Nietzsche's prescription for all that was joy. Like
Yeah.
we have to figure out what makes us happy, what
Mm.
we're here for. We have to define our own purpose and meaning in life, because you know um, prior prior to prior to the lion, in the camel stage, you have all these people that are, really depend on the church for their purpose in life, and the whole reason they want, you know, to live moral lives is just so that they can have the party after they die.
Yeah.
They don't care about the current state of the world. They don't care, about anything here. You know, uh,
Hmm.
they they are transcend they're transcendental. There's this Christian organization, not of this world, right?
Mm.
That sums it up perfectly. They're not here. They're not going to protect the planet. Fuck the planet. They don't care about the planet. All they care
Hmm.
about is their golden ticket to heaven, and eternal life after this life. So
Hmm.
basically this life is a waiting room.
Right.
And
Right.
and
Right. Right.
and again, Nietzsche really did not like that idea at all. For Nietzsche, joy is to be found right here and right now,
Hmm.
in the lived present moment. This is where the magic happens.
Yeah.
And so for him, it was about how do you create joy every
Sure.
day? How do
Sure.
you build a life? How do you build a world that you would not mind repeating infinitely
Yeah.
every single day? And I think that
That's
is
cool.
that is why the Übermensch idea really really speaks to me, because I've been, for the
Hmm.
last 9 months now, I've been practicing how to live a good life, how to
Yeah.
live a how to create a moral framework without this eternal parent figure going to punish me,
Yeah.
if I don't follow up to it. What does that look like? How does that look like between you and I? You know,
Sure.
it it has to involve
Well,
radical acceptance.
yeah. Yeah.
It has
Sure.
to involve, I mean, tolerance is a word, that's tolerance was replaced by acceptance. But in the early days, religious tolerance was a huge step forward, because
Yeah.
you wouldn't be killed because you didn't follow the same set of religious beliefs.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and that was a step forward for humanity. I believe. I
Yeah.
mean, that was a
Yeah.
that was a huge step forward.
Right.
And so we've been like doing this little tango where we've been taking two steps forward and one step back. You know what I mean? Like, and so now
Hmm.
we're at this precipice where we have to really be courageous
We have
and
to become the
aware.
child. Yeah.
We
We have to
have to
become the
become the
child.
child. Yeah. Hmm.
Well, on that note, it was great recording this podcast about Nietzsche and Übermensch. Of course, we're gonna be talking about more stuff later, but I guess that would be it for now.
Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
really enjoyed that.
For
Um,
sure. We'll see you. We'll see you soon.
okay.